On Friday, we brought you the story of Jack Phillips. He was sued in 2018 for refusing to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple on religious grounds and won in the Supreme Court. He's back in court after refusing to make a gender transition cake. Autumn Scardina is a transgender lawyer in Colorado who tried to order a cake in 2017 to celebrate her transition. She sued Phillips last year and won. The court claimed Phillips was in violation of state law and was fined $500.
But now Phillips is challenging that case, hoping to overturn the ruling. Tell us where you are right now in this attempt to turn the suit over.
Well, first of all, I just want to make it clear that I serve everybody who comes into my shop, but there are messages that people ask for with cakes that I can't express. In this case, it's our third lawsuit, and we were currently in the Colorado Court of Appeals, and so we're hoping to have that lower court decision reversed.
They're actually targeting you. Let's not be naive about it. They want to go to court. They want to make an example out of you.
This attorney that's suing me had first contacted me back in 2012 after the two men came in and asked for the same-sex wedding cake, and has been in contact ever since, emailing me, calling me a hypocrite and different things.
Wow.
And asking for a cake with Satan smoking marijuana. Told this attorney, we'll be glad to serve you other custom cakes. You're welcome in our shop. You can buy anything we have, but that's a cake that we can't create because it expresses a message that goes against my conscience.
What we've seen over the past 10 years is activists and government officials targeting people like Jack, artists, for their speech. They want to punish them for their views on some of life's biggest issues like marriage and gender. Free speech is for everyone, and what we're fighting for here is the right of every American to say what they believe without fear of government punishment.
A Georgia mom who works as a substitute teacher at her kid's school is suing her school district after she says she was fired for expressing concern over a book made available to young students in her classroom. The book, titled All Children Are Welcome, features woke ideology and pictures of same-sex couples. That mother, Lindsay Barr, and her attorney, Tyson Langhofer, are here. Lindsay, you said that this book violated your religious beliefs. What happened when you raised the issue to the school?
I went to the principal, expressed my concern, told her why I had the concern about the book, and within hours I was unable to access my teacher account and pick up substitute job.
Tyson, what happened to religious freedom in the United States of America?
That's a good question. I mean, thankfully, the First Amendment is still really strong, and Georgia actually passed the Parents' Bill of Rights, which actually protects parents' rights to review curriculum and to object to anything that shows concern. But, public schools have no business retaliating against parents for simply expressing concern about their children, and the First Amendment prohibits that, and so does Georgia law.
Tyson, here's a key line from your letter to the school. It says as followed: the firing is intended to send a message to Mrs. Barr and others in the community that if they criticize the school's approach to sensitive political topics or express viewpoints contrary to the school's preferred viewpoints, they will face the consequences. Tyson, isn't this part of the left's crusade to literally silence voices that they don't agree with?
I definitely think it is. I mean, this is a message to teachers like Lindsay, who are millions of them across the country. There are millions of people that agree with Lindsay's position on this topic, and yet the school is telling them you're not welcome in public schools. And that's wrong. That's contrary to the First Amendment.
Lindsay, the left always claims, look, we're the party of tolerance. Look how tolerant we are. Is the left being tolerant to you here, Lindsay?
I would say no. Teachers should never be fired for expressing genuine concern about what is happening in their children's schools, especially when your children are 6 years old. This is not tolerant, and it is not fair.
A Burlington woman tells us she thought she was going to be killed when she was randomly attacked last week outside of her home.
She's still a little fearful because of that attack. She told me the cuts and bruises on her face will heal over time, but recovering from the emotional trauma could take a lot longer.
He says, you are going to die by my hands today. And I'm like, please don't kill me. I have children. I have grandchildren.
And she believed him.
Towards the end of fighting him for so long, my body I had no gas in the tank. I was losing life.
It happened in just a split second. At about 8 a.m. Wednesday morning, she went outside to heat up her car. A man she'd never seen before, later identified as Richard Salmon of Delavan, leapt out from a hiding spot and attacked.
And he started screaming profanity at me, calling me a witch, to not cast any more spells.
For 10 minutes, he punched her in the eyes, forehead, cheeks, and mouth. He put his knee in her sternum, groped her, and tried to suffocate her.
I just started praying to God to please give my children the best life that they could, that they could have. Please make sure that my husband knows that I love him.
But a neighbor had heard her screams and called 911. Finally, police arrived and she knew the fight was over. Salmon was arrested. He's facing 3 felony charges and 3 misdemeanors. The woman was hospitalized and later testing revealed a concussion. She loves Burlington and wants her community to know the attack will not scare her away, but it has changed her.
But this incident has now pretty much closed me off to trusting anyone.
And the alerts from her security cameras have a different impact now.
I'm constantly checking it, for my own safety, because I feel as if I'm going to be attacked again.
But still, she's grateful she was the one attacked that day and not someone who could not defend themselves.
I do not hate this man. I hate this man's actions of that day.
Well, this time of year, you go shopping for the perfect gift or groceries for the perfect meal. But once you leave the store, look out. Someone may be setting their sights on you and your goods.
Juggings are violent personal crimes that can cost you and your family thousands of dollars and can even put your life at risk.
Easy money. I can take her. She's 5 foot tall, weighs maybe 100 pounds. She's our next good victim because she wears jewelry and she drives a big car.
HPD's Robbery Channel on YouTube showcasing several examples of juggings. Criminals following victims in parking lots and to their homes.
We're seeing, 20% some months, up to 40% in some months of an increase of the number of juggings.
HPD's own numbers show juggings in 2022 have already surpassed 2021 totals, with November and December numbers not even posted yet. Juggings have taken place far beyond Houston's city limits. And with the holiday season upon us, law enforcement around our area is gearing up.
Wedding photographers are finding themselves the target of a violent new crime wave. Bandits armed with guns pistol whipped this wedding photographer and wouldn't stop. They're after his pricey camera equipment. The photographer clings to his camera bag, desperate to protect the bride and groom's once-in-a-lifetime memories. Hours earlier, cops say this footage shows the same men robbing another photographer. The attacks happened at San Francisco's iconic Palace of Fine Arts, a favorite backdrop for wedding photos. Professional photographer Chloe Jackman says her equipment has been stolen out of her car 3 times.
It's a violation. It's heartbreaking. You want to scream.
Now, she's taking extra steps to stay safe on this photo shoot at the Palace of Fine Arts.
I have started to worry about my personal safety.
Chloe's brought her husband to help keep watch. She's also wearing a leather harness attached to her cameras to keep her equipment close. Husband and wife photographers Annie Zoe and David Zhang also fear for their safety.
You're actually hiring armed guards while you go on a wedding photo shoot?
We have.
I do feel like, every day whenever we go out for a photo shoot, our life is somehow in danger. And I feel like sooner or later, we will be the target.
Last year, this photographer was followed home for 40 miles after a photo shoot. When 2 suspects came out of nowhere, the man sounds his horn. One thief smashes in his back window while the other flashes a gun, making off with expensive equipment. Now, with these latest assaults on photographers, the industry is shaken.
I'm trying to hide my equipment. I'm trying to look around to see if there are people following me.
A garage engulfed in flames with dozens of cars inside. It's an example of escalating violence between rival gangs in Mayotte. Some residents say they've been terrified by run-ins with gang members.
When I arrived, I was just 30 meters away. I saw guys with machetes, stones and pistols. I saw a house they had set on fire.
When it starts to feel like a war, we can't stand it anymore. The situation in Mayotte is terrible.
The conflict has been centered in Mamoudzou, the capital of the Indian Ocean island. The situation degenerated on November 12 when a 20-year-old man was killed by a rival gang. Since then, the city has been rocked by stabbings and violent attacks. This motorist was injured when a group of young people approached him.
When they came towards us, they started to get aggressive. They wanted to set fire to the car. They took all there was to take. I gave it away, and they still didn't leave.
Dozens of additional police officers have been sent to the island, but elected officials and unions are demanding permanent military or police reinforcements.
Security camera footage shows the suspect wearing military-style fatigues with his face covered. He sprinted down corridors before firing shots from a semi-automatic pistol. Police say the attack was planned.
He had a swastika on his clothes when he committed the act, but when we seized the symbol, it was no longer attached to his clothes. He's kept them somewhere else. We saw everything, the clothes he wore, the weapons he used, the objects, the knives, everything.
Officers say the 16-year-old suspect targeted his former school before moving to a second school a few minutes away. Victims had little time to escape.
He had direct access to the staff room during break time. He surprised them and attacked 9 teachers who received help, but 2 died.
Parents arriving at the scene hoped for the best. The suspect is in custody. Authorities say he's a military officer's son and used registered weapons.
Well, there was something in the air over our nation's capital. Hundreds of Chinese-made drones, and national security experts say Beijing could be using them to spy on us. This, as the Pentagon warns, that China's troubling behavior is getting downright dangerous to our country's security, even admitting that China's nuclear-powered submarines are now capable of launching missiles that can reach the U.S. mainland without ever leaving Chinese waters.
Yeah, and at the same time, Intel officials are stepping up warnings about TikTok, used by millions of Americans, from lawmakers to your kids.
TikTok is a national security threat. When Americans' information is going over a Chinese server, which is 100% owned by a company in China, ByteDance.
So if you're a parent and you got a kid on TikTok, I would be very, very concerned. All of that data that your child is inputting and receiving is being stored somewhere in Beijing.
One FCC commissioner says TikTok is much more dangerous than it seems.
But at the end of the day, TikTok is China's digital fentanyl. A lot of people look at TikTok and they think it's just a fun application for sharing dance videos or other funny videos, but that's just the sheep's clothing. Underneath of it, it operates as a very sophisticated surveillance app.
Breaking tonight, there are growing concerns that one U.S. ally may be about to launch a ground attack on the other, and this could have big implications in the fight against ISIS. Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin is live at the Pentagon to tell us who we're talking about here and why it's so serious.
This is not the Turkey that U.S. national security leaders hope to be talking about on the eve of Thanksgiving. But as we speak, NATO ally Turkey says it plans to carry out a massive ground invasion into Syria, targeting the very same Kurdish groups the U.S. military has partnered with and relied on to fight ISIS in northeast Syria.
While we continue our air operations without interruption, we will land on top of the terrorists by land at the most convenient time for us. The day is near when those concrete tunnels, which terrorists use for safety, will become their graves.
Exclusive interview with Fox News moments ago. The top general for the Kurdish-led Syrian Defense Forces, General Mazloum Abdi, said his forces, the SDF, would no longer be able to help the U.S. fight ISIS because they are facing Turkish attacks. Turkish mortars, airstrikes, and drones began targeting Kurdish positions in Syria and Iraq in the wake of a November 13th terror bombing in Istanbul, which Turkey blamed on Kurdish groups. General Mazloum said the bomber was from ISIS and warned Turkey is using it as a pretense to ethnically cleanse the Kurds. Turkish warplanes struck a military base that the U.S. military shares with these Kurdish fighters. The U.S. has relied on the SDF to do the ground fighting against ISIS and for intelligence to target ISIS leaders like Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. In a strongly worded statement tonight, the Pentagon said it is deeply concerned by the escalation. Quote, recent airstrikes in Syria directly threaten the safety of U.S. personnel who are working in Syria with local partners to defeat ISIS and maintain custody of more than 10,000 ISIS detainees. There are about 900 U.S. troops on the ground in Syria tonight. U.S. forces were 300 yards from the SDF base in Hasaka, Syria, at the time of Turkish airstrikes on Tuesday.
Bodies lie in the gloom of a Ukrainian blackout. The collateral damage of Russia's latest onslaught against Ukraine's power grid. An onslaught civilians would be forgiven for feeling is directed specifically at them. Nearly 70 missiles and drones were launched, says Ukraine's leadership, 51 of them downed. Imagine the destruction if more had got through. President Zelensky insists engineers are working flat out to get power and water back up again, but they've got an enormous task ahead. Pretty much every city across this large country has a skyline as dark as this one on Wednesday night. From Kiev to Kharkiv, from Dnipro to Odessa, people are shivering in their candlelit homes, and the temperature has dropped below zero. It was a day that began with death too. This was a maternity unit on the outskirts of Zaporizhia until Russian missiles arrived. A newborn baby was killed. The mother and 2 doctors barely survived.
She said a missile hit the maternity hospital and she could not find her child. She was pulled out from under the rubble by the emergency workers. Her child was dead.
People here believe that Russia, losing ground to Ukraine's military, is trying to break civilian will instead. But despite the death and discomfort, they insist they won't be broken.
Tonight, rare scenes of open discontent. Video showing protesters in Xinjiang fed up with China's zero COVID rules, chanting "End the lockdown." Authorities wearing hazmat suits attempting to hold their ground. The show of public defiance, part of a national outcry, stoked by a deadly apartment fire Friday night that killed 10 people, including children. Videos on social media appearing to show emergency crews slowed down by COVID measures around the high-rise. It took 3 hours to put out the flames. Residents, many locked down for months, were trapped. China's government had tried tweaking zero COVID rules, but with cases now at a record high, they're bearing down again. In Beijing, schools, stores, and offices are closed like it's the early days of 2020. Except now, growing signs of pushing back. In Guangzhou, crowds charged at barricades, while in Zhengzhou this week, clashes at the Foxconn factory making iPhones. Videos on social media showed crowds of police shoving workers protesting over pay and COVID rules. Foxconn apologized and gave payouts for workers to leave, forcing Apple to warn that iPhone output will take a hit. Online criticism of the government's policy is escalating too, at times overwhelming censors here. In Xinjiang, officials say they're now reopening areas that are low risk. Protesters lamenting it comes far too late.
Tonight, terror returns to the streets of Jerusalem. Twin bombs detonated 30 minutes apart, exploding at 2 different bus stops during morning rush hour.
When the first explosion ripped through this bus stop a little after 7 a.m., it would have been full of commuters on their way to work, kids on their way to school. Now it's a crime scene.
The blast claiming the life of 15-year-old Aryeh Shupak, a citizen of both Israel and Canada. His parents laying their child to rest at a public funeral just hours after the blast. Around 20 others injured, including 2 Americans. The White House condemning the attack, saying the U.S. commitment to Israel's security is ironclad and unbreakable. Authorities say the sophisticated bombs were detonated with cell phones, and the bombers packed the explosives with nails to cause maximum carnage.
The scene is one of chaos. It's people screaming. Obviously, the explosion had just gone off. People were scared. People were suffering from blast injuries, from injuries with shrapnel.
Israel's outgoing Prime Minister Yair Lapid ordering a manhunt for those responsible for the first bombings in Jerusalem in 6 years. The last attack in 2016 also targeting public transport. The bombings come as Benjamin Netanyahu prepares to return as Israel's prime minister for a 3rd time, on the verge of forming a coalition government including parties from the far right. One incoming minister today calling for targeted assassinations of Palestinian militants in response to the attacks. An escalating cycle of violence with no end in sight.
No group has yet claimed responsibility for today's attacks, although both Hamas and Islamic Jihad have praised the bombing. Israel's police say they were determined to track down every lead to find those responsible.
Protests in Iran are continuing across the country and are now in their 10th week. The province at the forefront of the struggle, Kurdistan, where Mahsa Jina Amini, whose death in the custody of the morality police triggered the uprising that many call a revolution. The activist news agency HRANA said that as of Saturday, November 26th, 450 protesters have been killed, including 63 children. It said about 57 members of the security forces have also been killed and an estimated 18,173 people arrested. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights addressed the situation in Iran, specifically that of women and those sentenced to death for their participation in the protests.
I therefore call for independent, impartial and transparent investigative processes into alleged violations of human rights that are consistent with international standards.
A day later, the Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei praised the paramilitary Basij forces for confronting the demonstrators.
You saw in these recent matters that the persecuted people of Basij sacrificed themselves to prevent the nation from succumbing to the force of a group of killers, rebels, illiterate, enslaved people. They sacrificed themselves to prevent the cruelty of another.
Meanwhile, the Iranian group Black Reward said it targeted the semi-official Fars news agency in a cyber attack on Friday. In a statement, Fars said that it was subject to almost daily hacker attacks, mostly coming from what it calls the occupied territories, hinting at Israel. Far-reaching hacker attacks like this are likely to originate from Iran itself and not from the West, the traditional scapegoat of the Islamic Republic's leaders. The uprising against them continues on the internet and on the streets.
One day, Jesus is coming. You may be at church. You may be at work. You may be asleep. God grant that you will be ready when He makes His personal appearance.